Hey guys, welcome to Y&R Daily Update YouTube channel. Today's topics: the Young and the Restless Spoilers. Claire had reached the point where the silence between her and Kyle weighed more heavily than any argument ever could. What had once felt like a grand romance now lay in fragments, cold routines, and empty reassurances that she could no longer force herself to believe. Each day the distance widened, and though she had not yet summoned the moment to declare it finished, the inevitability of their collapse pressed on her like a storm cloud refusing to move. Deep inside, she knew the truth. There would come a time when she could no longer pretend, when her heart would no longer tolerate the pretense of a love that had already died. That truth was both terrifying and liberating. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. For the only question that remained was when the collapse would happen, not if. It was during this turbulence that Holden began to drift into her orbit. Their conversations were never intended to carry the weight of confession, but as they exchanged thoughts on love, betrayal, and the longing for something real, the parallels in their experiences became undeniable. They spoke of dreams deferred, of the courage it takes to walk away from hollow commitments, and of the scars that remain long after passion cools. Yet, despite the discovery of their shared outlook, the connection lingered in a fragile place, powerful enough to draw them together, but not yet strong enough to solidify into something undeniable. And so they met more often, first by coincidence, then by choice, until the rhythm of seeing each other began to blur the boundaries of what was friendship and what was temptation. Kyle, ever possessive despite his own transgressions, began to notice the undercurrents. He warned Claire to be cautious, his words carrying the weight of authority that he had long since forfeited. How could he lecture her on loyalty when his own betrayal with Audra still hung over their relationship like a poisonous cloud? His secret rendezvous, the humiliating whispers of their intimacy, were still raw in Claire's memory. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. For him to stand before her as if entitled to dictate her choices was not only hypocritical but insulting. Claire's resentment sharpened with every word, fueling the conviction that whatever future she had, it could not be tethered to a man who demanded fidelity he had already shattered. But Victoria, fierce and commanding in her own right, posed a different obstacle. From the very beginning, she had disapproved of Holden, dismissing him as unworthy of Claire's time, a distraction that could only lead her daughter astray. Her disapproval, however, was not born solely of maternal protectiveness, but of a deeper disdain for Holden's presence in their world. She saw him as reckless, beneath their name, a stain that could tarnish Claire's image if left unchecked. And, as Victoria's warnings grew sharper, her demands clearer, Claire's rebellion only deepened. For Claire was not a woman who bent to orders, not even from her mother. To her, defiance was not only instinct, but identity. If Victoria said Holden was forbidden, then the fire in Claire's chest only burned brighter, pushing her further into the very arms her mother wanted her to avoid. The breaking point came not in quiet whispers or heated words, but in a moment of unbearable clarity. Victoria, suspicious and restless, followed Claire and discovered the scene she most feared. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. Her daughter entangled with Holden, bodies pressed in the throes of desire that had crossed far beyond innocence. The sight ignited something primal in her. Without restraint, she stormed forward and her hand struck Claire across the face. A slap not merely of outrage, but of betrayal, of desperation to reclaim control over a daughter who had slipped far from her grasp. The sound of it echoed louder than any argument they had ever had. A rupture in the delicate thread that bound mother and daughter. For Claire, it was the final confirmation of everything she already knew. She could not be caged, not by Kyle's hypocrisy, not by Victoria's authority, not by the suffocating expectations of anyone who thought they could dictate her choices. That single act set the stage for war. Between Claire and Victoria, there would be no reconciliation, not now, perhaps not ever. Each stood as a mirror to the other's strength, unwilling to yield, unwilling to admit defeat. What began as a private matter of the heart now threatened to engulf their family in scandal, pride, and bitter conflict. And as Claire stood, her cheek still burning from the slap, she felt not shame, not regret, but resolve. If her love with Kyle had already crumbled, if her connection with Holden defied the will of those who sought to control her, then so be it. The path ahead would be brutal, but it would be hers. Claire had reached the boiling point where her emotions could no longer be tamed, where every fragile bond that held her to her family and to Kyle seemed to snap at once. The slap from Victoria was more than a physical sting. It was the culmination of years of tension, judgment, and suffocating expectations that she had never asked for. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. The force of her mother's hand across her face seemed to echo louder than any words, reverberating through the hollow places inside her heart. Claire's chest heaved as she shouted back, trembling with fury, insisting that this was her life, her decisions, and that no one, not even her powerful mother, had the right to control what she did or whom she loved. Her voice shook with indignation as she reminded everyone in the room that she was no longer a child to be guided like a puppet on a string, but a grown woman who bore every right to carve her path, even if that path led to ruin. And yet, even as her anger cascaded through the room like a flood breaking a dam, a fragment of clarity seeped into her heart. She could not keep running from the truth that before she could step forward with Holden, before she could explore the dangerous passion that ignited when they were near each other, she needed to end her ties to Kyle once and for all. The hypocrisy of Kyle's warnings had become unbearable. For months, he had paraded himself as the wronged lover, cautioning Claire to be careful, as though he alone held the right to define morality. But the memory of his betrayal with Audra was still fresh, carved like a scar across Claire's pride. How could he claim authority when he had so willingly surrendered his fidelity to lust and secrecy? His late-night meetings, his whispers, and clandestine trysts were humiliating reminders that he had no ground left to stand on. Kyle's demands for caution rang hollow, dripping with hypocrisy, and the sight of his disapproval only deepened Claire's conviction that she needed to free herself from the shadow of his duplicity. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. The relationship had withered into something cruel. A union kept alive only by appearances. A partnership devoid of trust. A love story whose pages had been ripped out and burned. Claire understood that the only way to regain herself was to destroy what remained between them. No matter how painful the wreckage, Holden's presence in her life had been an unexpected spark in the middle of that collapse. Their conversations began innocently enough. Gentle exchanges about love and loss, about the weight of expectations, about the wounds betrayal leaves behind. But over time, those exchanges grew heavier, sharper, carrying undercurrents of intimacy that neither of them dared to name aloud. They began to see themselves reflected in one another. Two souls searching for authenticity in a world that thrived on facades. What Claire found in Holden was not just attraction, but recognition. He understood the sting of being underestimated, the ache of being judged, the desperation to find meaning beyond what others dictated. And so they met again and again, drawn together as though fate had tethered them with invisible threads. Each meeting chipped away at the boundaries that separated them until one night, standing far too close, their breaths collided, and the unspoken became undeniable. Victoria, however, was no stranger to temptation, and she could sense when her daughter was treading the edge of danger. For her, Holden represented everything she feared for Claire. Recklessness, instability, a disruption of the carefully constructed life Victoria had envisioned for her. To Victoria, Claire was not only her daughter, but her legacy, and the thought of her straying into Holden's arms was unthinkable. Her opposition was not merely about propriety, it was about control. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. Victoria believed she knew best. Believed that years of experience and scars had earned her the right to dictate the trajectory of Claire's life. She warned her daughter repeatedly, her words growing sharper with each passing day, commanding her to stay away from Holden, to resist the temptation of a man who could never offer her stability or respectability. But what Victoria failed to see was that her commands only fed Claire's defiance. Claire was not a woman who submitted to orders, not even from her mother. The more Victoria forbade her, the more determined Claire became to prove that her choices were her own. The explosion came when Victoria followed her instincts and confronted the reality she had most feared. She found Claire and Holden together, the intimacy between them undeniable. A moment of passion poised to shatter the thin veil of denial that still covered their relationship. To Victoria, it was betrayal, layered upon betrayal. Her daughter abandoning Kyle, ignoring her mother's wisdom, and defying the boundaries of family expectation. Fury overtook reason, and in an instant, Victoria's hand lashed out, striking Claire across the face with the force of every pent-up fear and frustration she carried. The sound echoed like a gunshot, silencing the room, turning passion into chaos. Claire, stunned, touched her burning cheek, her eyes wide, not with shame, but with rage. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. In that instant, the rift between mother and daughter widened into a chasm that no apology could easily bridge. Claire's words came like a torrent, raw and unfiltered. She screamed that she would not live her life under chains, that she had the right to decide for herself, to choose whom she loved, and to make mistakes if she had to. Her voice cracked under the weight of tears she refused to shed, but her resolve was steel. She declared that, if she wanted Holden, she would choose him. Not because it was safe, not because it was wise, but because it was her choice. Yet, even in her fury, a sliver of honesty broke through. Before she could give herself to Holden completely, before she could surrender to the dangerous pull of desire, she had to end things with Kyle. For Claire, freedom was not found in secrecy, but in clarity. She would not allow herself to become what she despised. If she was to start again, it would be as a woman unbound, as someone who stood firmly in her truth. Victoria, meanwhile, stood rigid, her hand trembling from the force of her own action, her heart pounding with the recognition of what she had done. She justified it silently, reminding herself that mothers sometimes must be cruel to be kind, that a moment of anger could save a daughter from years of regret. She believed she was protecting Claire, steering her away from a mistake that would consume her. But the look in Claire's eyes told a different story, one of betrayal so deep that no reasoning could soften it. For the first time, Victoria questioned whether her control had not safeguarded her daughter, but destroyed the fragile bond between them. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. The aftermath was heavy with silence, the kind that settles after an earthquake when the ground is still shifting, but the damage is already done. Claire stood with her head high, refusing to let her tears fall, vowing to take control of her life in the only way she knew how, by ending the dead weight of her relationship with Kyle, and by embracing the fire that Holden represented. She would not be tamed by Kyle's hypocrisy, nor by Victoria's authority, nor by the suffocating expectations of anyone who thought they knew what was best for her. She would walk her own path, whatever it cost. For Victoria, the battle had only just begun. She had drawn a line in the sand, and Claire had stepped defiantly across it. The war between mother and daughter promised to tear their family apart. Each side convinced of their righteousness, each unwilling to surrender. And as Holden stood caught in the storm, he realized that his connection to Claire had thrust him into a war he had never intended to fight. The choices ahead were brutal: love or loyalty, passion or ruin, freedom or obedience. But for Claire, the decision was already made. The slap had not broken her, it had awakened her. The narrative centers on Claire, whose relationship with Kyle has deteriorated into silence and distrust, marked by hypocrisy and betrayal. Claire feels suffocated by the crumbling romance, unable to sustain the facade of a love that has died. Amid this emotional turmoil, Holden emerges as a new, magnetic presence in her life. Their conversations reveal shared experiences of heartbreak, betrayal, and yearning for authenticity, gradually blurring the lines between friendship and temptation. Kyle's possessiveness and hypocrisy, highlighted by his own betrayal with Audra, further alienate Claire, deepening her resentment and conviction to break free. Meanwhile, Victoria, Claire's mother, fiercely opposes Holden, seeing him as a threat to the family's reputation and control over Claire's life. Victoria's disdain culminates in a dramatic confrontation when she catches Claire and Holden in an intimate moment and slaps her daughter, shattering their already fragile relationship. This physical and emotional rupture symbolizes the breaking point for Claire, who rejects the control exerted over her by both Kyle and Victoria. Determined to reclaim her agency, Claire vows to end her toxic relationship with Kyle and embrace the passionate yet uncertain path with Holden. The story closes with Claire standing resolute amid family conflict and personal upheaval, ready to fight for her freedom and own choices, while Victoria braces for a battle that threatens to tear their family apart. Claire's relationship with Kyle collapses under silence, betrayal, and hypocrisy. Holden becomes Claire's confidant and temptation, mirroring her emotional struggles. Kyle's possessiveness contrasts sharply with his own infidelity, fueling Claire's resentment. Victoria's opposition to Holden is driven by control and fear of scandal. The mother-daughter conflict erupts into a physical and emotional confrontation. Claire chooses independence and self-determination over family expectations. The ensuing family feud sets the stage for a dramatic and painful power struggle, the collapse of a relationship marked by hypocrisy. Claire's disenchantment with Kyle is intensified by his double standards. His demands for loyalty ring hollow after his own betrayal. This dynamic underscores how trust, once broken, can corrode a relationship beyond repair, leaving only resentment and silence in its wake. Claire's emotional exhaustion symbolizes a broader theme of the unsustainability of relationships built on pretense and dishonesty. The complexity of emotional transition. Claire's growing connection with Holden is portrayed not as a sudden passion but as a gradual, nuanced shift from friendship to romantic temptation. Their shared experiences of pain and longing create a fragile bond that challenges Claire's existing commitments. This evolution highlights the human need for understanding and authenticity, especially in times of emotional crisis. Possessiveness versus authenticity in relationships. Kyle's possessiveness, despite his infidelity, reflects a controlling, patriarchal mindset that seeks to dictate Claire's choices while excusing his own failings. Claire's rejection of Kyle's moral authority represents a broader assertion of individual autonomy against toxic relationship dynamics, where one partner demands fidelity but does not give it. Maternal control and rebellion. Victoria's fierce opposition to Holden and her physical aggression towards Claire reveal the destructive potential of control disguised as protection. The mother-daughter conflict is emblematic of generational tensions where parental authority clashes with adult children's desire for independence. Victoria's actions, though intended to protect, instead fracture the familial bond, illustrating how control can backfire and alienate loved ones. The slap as a symbol of rupture and awakening. The physical slap is a pivotal moment that crystallizes the breakdown of communication and trust between mother and daughter. It serves as a powerful metaphor for the emotional violence and betrayal that have simmered beneath the surface. For Claire, it marks not defeat but an awakening and irreversible commitment to live life on her own terms, despite the cost. The role of social expectations and reputation. Victoria's disdain for Holden is tied not only to his personal character but to concerns about social standing and legacy. This highlights how societal pressures and family reputation can exert a stifling influence on personal relationships, especially in environments where appearances are paramount. Claire's defiance is also a rejection of these external pressures. The consequences of defiance and the coming conflict. Claire's decision to end things with Kyle and pursue Holden despite opposition sets the stage for an inevitable family feud. The narrative captures the painful but necessary process of breaking free from destructive ties. It also illustrates the harsh realities of choosing passion and freedom over loyalty and obedience. With all the attendant risks of scandal, isolation, and conflict, this story explores the intricate dynamics of love, betrayal, autonomy, and family conflict, painting a vivid portrait of a woman's struggle to reclaim her identity amid the wreckage of her past relationships and the weight of familial expectations. Claire's journey is one of painful growth, defiance, and the search for authenticity in a world rife with hypocrisy and control.